Welcome. You are listening or perhaps watching the next episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. And today I'm joined with some guests. And if you are only listening, you don't know who they are yet. If you're watching, you can see them, but I haven't introduced them yet. So you don't know. Could be anybody. You'll just have to wait and find out. Yeah. Today we are going to be discussing an episode of Two Schools of Thought. And Jeremy and I discussed, you know what, maybe it'd be kind of fun and cool to have some outside people's opinions on some of these episodes rather than just he and I. So I'm joined by a few people, which I'll introduce in just a second. But until then, don't forget, Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio is your place to go to find everything about this episode. In fact, if you went there, you would probably see, because there's probably a picture, who the three guests are, but you're not sure. So go to Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. That's where we have show notes on the episode, extra photos of things, transcripts of this episode. Largely, you can go to whistlekick.com for all of the things that we do to connect, educate, and entertain traditional martial artists of the world. Man, it is early this morning and I can't talk. Blah, blah, blah. Connect, educate, and entertain traditional martial artists of the world. And you can find things there, everything from events that we run and apparel that you can purchase, whether it's sweatshirts like this really cool dragon hoodie, or hats or shirts, sweatpants, all kinds of things. And you can use the code podcast15 to save yourself 15% off everything not everything, most everything. You can't save money on events. And you can also find information on our school owners program, Whistlekick Alliance. So I encourage people to check that out. So let's jump right into this. We've got three guests that I'm looking at here in no particular order. I'm just actually, you know what? That's wrong. I'm going to go in the order that I see you on my screen.
Yeah, which is the best first. Yeah.
Well, now I don't want to go to Stephen Watson, who is our first guest. Stephen, how are you this morning?
I already won the episode. I'm great.
Great to see you. Nice to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Going in my order, no particular order of importantness. We're also joined by Nick Tabor. How are you, Nick?
Pleasure to be here. Happily, just very happy to see all your faces. And thank you for inviting me on this episode.
Absolutely. Great to have you. And familiar face to the show, Victor Guarino. Victor, how are you?
Bronze medalist.
I guess you forgot that I'm the lowly Victor Guarino now, since I'm the last one that was mentioned. But I am doing great.
I feel like I want to take a picture. There we go.
First place in humility.
I took the picture.
Well, I mean, when you're this low, the rain hits you last. So,
listeners of the show, I want to let you know I started up a group chat yesterday with these three fine gentlemen to just discuss what time we're going to get together, the topic, stuff like that. And my phone immediately blew up with things that made me keep laughing. And because everybody is so fun, and I actually sent a message to Jeremy and said, God help me, I may have made a very grave mistake by inviting these three people onto a show. And
you're quoting my teacher, you know.
And Jeremy said, good luck, my friend. So I do want to jump into this topic, though. We're going to be discussing two schools of thought, right? For the listeners that maybe haven't heard our other episodes, this concept is here's a way that schools can do things, and there's kind of two ways to do it. And one way is definitely not right, and one way is not wrong, but there are pros and cons to both. And so we're here to discuss that topic and that way of doing things, and that topic being, during class, do you allow your parents to sit and watch your students progress through their class, or do you ask them to not be there? Again, one way is not right or wrong. There's just a couple of different ways to think about this. And I'm actually going to throw it to Nick first, because I know that you have recently mentioned that you are going to be starting up your school again.
Yes.
And I'm curious, have you given any thought to this topic?
Yeah, I actually have. And over the years, I've always encouraged parents to be watching because, like, right from the word go, I always say we're a team on this. And,
Mm.
no matter what happens, and, I've had several parents that have brought their kids in saying, fix my child, quote unquote. And then, but others saying, no, come in and see this because, what we do in the dojo has to extend at home.
Mm.
If I say something, if I do something and say, okay, carry this forward, and I expect a student to practice a kata, you're going to be my eyes and ears that say, I trust the student will do it, but I also want the parents to see, yeah, sensei told you to do this. Why aren't you getting it done? And I think it's a very useful tool.
Yeah. I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
Stephen, have you had experience with this yourself?
Yeah, I've avoided ulcers for my entire life, and in a related news, I don't teach children, but I have taught children for decades. I just don't currently. And I can see the value on both sides. I think without the parents there, you can be assured that the kids are focused and the parents are not interfering.
Right.
I can get that. Had an opportunity to train at another school last week, and that they have a big children's program, and I noticed that they had a little sign at the entry to the mat that was directed to the parents, like your job is not to speak to your children or coach your children or correct your children. It's to be here for them, right? Before and after class. And I thought, wow, that probably came about because it was a problem somebody thought needed correcting. And I had never done that, but I thought that was important. I had a couple of rules when I was teaching children. One is that there was always at least one parent there. Right. And mostly for legal reasons. I don't want to be anywhere where it's not my kids. Not that anybody had any concerns or anything, but I just thought, like, if everybody comes and drops their kid off, there's no class. Somebody has to stay, and they usually coordinate it, and it was fine. And two, when the parents were there, I would encourage them to pay attention, but a lot of times they have their own work to do, or they're on their phones or reading or what have you. And I thought that was fine as long as they're not interacting. And I'd try and get the kids to learn to come to me first, not just because their parents there. Like, I am the authority right now. And often I would use it because when the kid would kind of repeatedly make the same errors, I'd have them walk up to the parents and apologize, right? Which is like a giant ocean to cross just the mat over to their parent. And I'd say, have to get their parents' attention and speak to them and say, I know that you spent money on this and I'm not using your money well because I'm goofing off or whatever. And, in their own words, but I'd have to say, like, and really just to kind of register for them that, it's free to the kid, but it isn't free to the family. And it's an investment that they're kind of failing at. And I wouldn't be all that harsh, but at some point I'd say, I'm glad your parents here. They're paying for something that you're not getting. And I can't make you get it, but I can teach you about responsibility of apology. And that really shifted for them, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tried to make the best use of having the parents there, because they were there. That's how I saw it.
And Victor, I know that your school started within the last year. I know that you have a children's program. What are your thoughts? Your first initial thoughts going into this?
I mean, there's definitely strong reasons for and against having the parents present there, and we definitely do. It was a big part of when we were doing the construction on our space, which I did most of the interior kind of stuff myself. Karen wanted a place for parents to sit because it was important to her. I had taught in a school where I was running a program out of a fitness club, and we were in the dance room, and the parents would come in, drop their kids off, and then go work out.
Uh-huh.
and I would always close the door. The room was cameraed, so everything was fine and everything into the rest. But I was always close the door just to keep other like gym rats from coming in and trying to use the room while I was teaching. I still had to deal with that. So the shut door always, was a good deterrent for that. But one of the things that I noticed was, out of all of my parents, I really only had one dad who was super involved in his kids' training. And that was because this guy was a stand-up dude. Like he had his son in martial arts for all of the right reasons. He was very much involved in the best possible way a father could be in his son's life. And it became something that was important to me as well. I have also seen it in even in our own school, just in the past year, being an obstacle that we've had to come across and deal with. But overall, I think, like, I'm of the personal opinion that it's worth it because it builds community. And it was funny. I made a page on our website with just all of the different programs, and I put the tag, the title at the top is "Find Where You Belong," like thinking literally like find the program that is right for you. But then there was one
great
day
title.
during our youth class that Karen was running them through some drills, and I looked over and every single one of our seats were filled with parents. And like not just like one parent, but like both parents. And they were not on their phones. They were engaged either with each other, talking about what their kids were doing, watching their kids, laughing. And I was like, oh, dang, these parents belong here and are part of it. And like my parents, all through my training, my mom started training after I moved out of New Jersey and is now training with my first instructor in her 60s. But like, they were dojo parents, but they were still very much involved with everything that we did at the dojo. And I think that is an important thing. And I find that it is worth the headache that I have to deal with the occasional helicopter mom or dad who steps out onto my mat to move something that they don't want their kid to accidentally bump into.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, so, let's tackle both of these sides here. Let's talk about having parents involved and talk. We can each we'll kind of go around and talk about some of the benefits of having the parents involved. And one that I was going to say is we have had students in our school whose parents would sit and watch and enjoy it to the point that they joined the program. And if they weren't there, if they were not allowed to be there, I'm not sure that they would have joined our school as students themselves. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there is a benefit to having parents there because, as some of you have mentioned, that it gets them involved. Let's talk about some of the other the benefits of having parents involved. Nick, what's another one you can think of?
The real big benefit itself would be really you have your own internal marketing there. So, I mean, parents would talk to each other, and if, kids who have problems or something and say, again, my kid joined here, you might want to join your child into this. This is really good. But also it's as Victor said, it does build a sense of community very quickly. And some of my friends who I still have to this day, even since I was a kid and began my training, were a result of the parents getting very close to my parents, and doing what they do. And, some of it was peppered in as well was, legal reasons, of course, something does happen. And also it carries on, the lessons itself, and learning other things, what, you might learn a sidekick, but there's the reason behind the sidekick, or there's the lesson behind that they can carry on and help you out.
Yeah.
As well.
And Stephen, you brought up some things as well that essentially legality reason.
It's a legal consideration.
Yeah. What else are we missing what are some other benefits that we get from having those parents there?
Well, for one, I can't fit in my marketing all the benefits of martial arts.
Sure.
You have to pick 2 or 3 things to, hey, teach self-confidence, teach self-defense, whatever it is. But as martial artists, career martial artists, I could 7 trillion,
Right.
but the parents sitting there for a few classes, they start to see, oh my God, you're teaching so much more than how to block a punch. Like so much more. And so, they tend to become proponents of the martial arts and perhaps of our own school. I think it's important, if you do have parents, to have a sense of a threshold of involvement that you want to work towards. And as Victor was suggesting, sometimes they go a little bit beyond it, and you start to have to accommodate that or address it or shift the rule set or put up a sign or what have you. And some people, sometimes they're under involved. They all just drop them off. They all just spend time on their phones. So I think having a sense of where that threshold is, and if the parent starts to try and push beyond that threshold, say, wow, you really are interested in this. And you know what? The way that you can be involved, there's a program for that, and it's called the adult class. Like if you're that into it, there's a way to be that into it.
Yeah.
Now, I've never run a parent-child class, which is that somewhere in the middle of involvement, right? And I think that's a great way to do it too. Where my sort of threshold would be, I don't want the parents involved during the class at all, obviously, unless there's an injury or something. But even to the point of the kid starts crying and they're upset about something, like, try working it through with me and your partner first. Gotcha. Even though your mom's right there, and I know, that's easy. Let's try and do this. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean I succeed. Sometimes, the parent's going to come out with a Band-Aid, and that, that's how it goes. But the threshold for me would be, when I talk about homework, I want I would address the parents as though they're my students. Gotcha. Put your phone down, yep. Sit up, pay attention. I'm assigning homework, right? Gotcha. And 2, if we're doing anything with weapons, now I want the parents to pay attention. And I would tell the kids, you must practice, and you may not practice unless a parent is paying attention. Mm-hmm. Not in the room, and not your Uncle Charlie who sometimes visits, not an adult, but your parent. Who, or, guardian, whoever is here, yep. That learns this stuff. And I don't want them kind of, in the room on their laptop while you practice. I want them only, teaching them about the value of focus. Yeah. Whether they do that as well as I'd like, I don't know. But that would be sort of my threshold of engagement that I wanted for them.
Nice. All right, that makes sense. Victor, what are your thoughts? Anything else we're missing in terms of benefits of having the parents in the room?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've kind of talked around it and alluded to it in a lot of things, but I made a realization when in my training very early on, when I was 16, my first instructor helped me make this realization, especially because I was 2 years, I had been homeschooled. And so the only other real interaction weekly that I had with kids my own age was in martial arts. And then I went to high school, and I'm like, man, none of my friends understand me. Like they think I'm dark. They think I'm violent. Or they're just weak. Like, I remember one time, this kid, I was just completely zoned out beginning of the day. This kid came up to me and was like, hey, Vic, and went to, in homeroom, went to punch me in the shoulder. I'm not paying attention. You guys probably can all guess exactly what happened. Bang. And I just knocked it out of the way, bruised their arm. And I was like, wow, people are soft, because at that point I had been training since I was 12. I didn't, with all other people who had been training since they were 12, I had a 9-year-old girl who used to hurt me all the time because she had been training longer than me. So
you can see that in the show notes. Victor was beat up by a 9-year-old girl.
Yeah, absolutely.
And civilians are soft. I think those are the
two takeaways. But one of the things that my instructor explained to me, and the older that I get, the more I interact, the more I realize this, is that martial arts, the things that we do, is so, I guess niche is the word, that we are a culture that exists within a subculture of society. And there's a lot of people who never have trained, but view it from the outside and don't understand. But you wouldn't go to New York City and go to Little Italy as not an Italian person, like not an Italian immigrant, as like my family are. That's why I'm using this as an example. And just immediately walk into Little Italy and judge everything that they do, because you have no idea why they're doing what they're doing, what isn't acceptable. Like the people who want to learn about a culture, the best thing to do is to go and insert yourself into it in order to gain a deeper understanding of it. Martial arts isn't like soccer or basketball. We don't have easy access for people to insert themselves into that culture. We have easier access now in the age of the internet, but even so, that has a lot of misinformation in it as well. The best way to do it is to have the parents, hey, your kids are doing this thing. You should at least, like Stephen was saying, like, not just sit on your phone. I've got parents who sit on your phone, but there are moments and whole classes in which they will put their phone down and engage, because they realize their kid is into this. And if they don't pay attention, when their kid goes home and asks for help or asks to explain something to them, they're going to have no idea and not even know where to start in how to help their kids. So the best thing that I tell our parents, and it's funny because we just gave 1 free month to the moms and dads of all of our toddlers in our Toddler and Me program, because I was like, hey, martial arts is a family thing and you should all do it. Here's a schedule to all of our adult stuff. And I think that you need to be around adults too, and not just only speaking toddler world language. So come do adult stuff with us too. Here's a month. But I did that because I said, hey, eventually some of you have said you want your kid to be a part of our youth program when they get older.
Right.
Wouldn't it be great if you, even if you don't stick with us, but if you even had a month to
some
2 months of basics, that when they start, you're a little bit ahead of them and can help them at the beginning. And that's going to push them even further beyond their already head start that some of our toddlers are getting, that I had when I started at 12. These kids understand their body and balance better than I did at 13, and they're 4. So I think that's a really good benefit.
I've coached some of my students who run their own schools to occasionally offer a clinic, let's call it, 30 minutes or something, free probably, where the adult is not in a Toddler and Me class, and they're not in an adult program, but they have some engagement with the kid. And the idea is, how can you support your kids' practice at home? So it's just simple safety stuff, like how to hold a bag, or here's how to read the curriculum sheet, or here's how we set our reins so we're not giving each other black eyes, or just very, very simple stuff. So you're kind of supporting the parents in a very sort of skeletal way to support the kids' practice, so that now I'm reinforcing the value of practicing at home and homework, and I'm getting just a little bit. It's engagement without commitment from the parents, and that improves the safety. And I'm hoping that gets them doing it together a bit, which is that whole bonding thing that we really, really all want in the martial arts.
Yeah, and before we move on to talking about the benefits of not having parents in there, the last thing that I'll say about having the parents in the class is I actually use them when they're in the class. Like, they're sitting off at the side, but there are times where I have said, hey, parent A, can you come out and help me with this? Maybe it is holding a bag, because it's very important that you learn how to hold a bag correctly. But a 10-year-old kicking a bag, it doesn't matter how the adult holds it, they're going to be safe for the most part, right?
Right.
So they don't have to learn the real intricate details. So just holding a bag, or at the end of class, sometimes we'll do jump rope to teach the kids, body and jumping and whatever. And I'll grab a parent to help me jump, do the jump rope. Or we're talking about middle blocks in class. So for those of you not watching, you won't see this, but I talk about having this a nice, good, strong here. And if it's here, if it's really, really close to you, it's very weak. And I would pull the largest dad watching the class out onto the floor and have them put their arm really close to them and both
Right.
of them, and I could push them over. But then I just have them move their arms here, and I can't push them over, or vice versa. So like I use
Right.
them in class, and I think there is a benefit to that. But let's now look at the other side. What are the benefits of not having the parents in the room? Stephen, we'll start with you.
I think the primary, and I haven't done it that way, so it's me interacting with other martial artists and visiting other schools and surmising, is that the kids are more focused and they come to recognize more of a sole authority figure rather than a bureaucracy of both parents are here, there's other adults, there's the teacher. Then it's a little bit more clear. Here's who I'm guided by. Here's who I bring my problems to. Here's who I'm listening to. Here's who I'm focused on. And the incidence of meddling is less.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Nick, what about yourself? Anything you can think of?
I think the benefit would really be if they're not there, that a kid who wants to talk about something or may have something that they want to bring up or just
that's good.
can't talk about, is already there. So like I had one, and I'm going to minimize details as much as possible. I had a student who he fell in, and his leg was pretty banged up. And in school, and he's coming to tell him, and his mom dropped him off, and it's just like, yeah, I got to take off, and it's just going to be you guys tonight. I'm like, okay, fine, no problem. And he's telling me about how he fell in front of his classmates, and just tripped and fell, and then how he handled that because a bully pushed him. And I'm like, okay, now we can, now I can dissect that, because if his mom or dad were there, he probably didn't want to be so open. He probably didn't want to be so open. And so like it builds the trust with me, just building off of what Stephen was saying. And I mean, it builds up the trust to say, look, you can talk to me about something if you need to. And that's an advancement. I mean, as you move on, and as you go higher in the belts, and as you go higher on, you build I think everybody could say this. You build a very tight connection with your instructor, regardless of whether you can go for other things, because there are things you can teach later on. And if you don't have those seeds planted early on, that relationship never really grows.
Gotcha. Victor, any other benefits to not having them in the room?
Yeah, to build off of Nick, who was building off of what Steve said. I used to run youth programs for nonprofit organizations like churches and other kind of religious stuff. We would run after school programs and stuff like that. And kids are observing all of the time and taking things in all of the time. And unfortunately, they are always drawing conclusions. The unfortunate thing is they're not always talking to the fully developed, for lack of a better word. If you're just listening to this, I was making air quotes when I referred to adults as fully developed, scientifically speaking, fully developed brains. They're not always talking about those conclusions and getting other perspectives because they don't understand yet that they need to. And so sometimes, and I have had experiences with this, with a parent has been in the room and I have just happened to say something that a parent has said to that kid maybe that day or earlier. But because the parent is present in the room, the kid will look back at mom and dad and think that I'm taking their side, when really their parent just said something that was true, universally speaking. And I think it's so important for young people to understand and learn how to discern for themselves there are other adults outside of their parents and outside of their family that, like Nick was saying, I can go to for advice. I don't feel comfortable going to mom and dad for this, because especially when they hit that teenage age, it's that awkward, I've seen it in a lot of girls. Like, I look up to and respect mom because from the time that I was born, she was the epitome of a woman and what a woman should be, and this
Mhm.
icon, and I want to be that. And now I'm a teenager, and I don't want to be like mom, but I want to be like mom. So there's that frustration there. And whereas now they come to, like, what I hope is, if they're having a really bad time and they come at, with mom, or they just argued with mom, now they come to class, our teenage class, and they have Sensei Karen, another adult female, powerful, strong woman in their life, who's emulating a lot of the similar things of their mom. Well, now this is where you get to see a kid develop who they want to be. We're all picking and choosing the aspects of the generation above us that we like, that we want to emulate, and maybe the parts of the people that we don't. And so now you have a child thinking, maybe, there are things about my mom or my parents that I like and I want to be like, but it's also okay to see things in my parents who are just human, right? That I maybe don't want to be like and emulate, and it can be both. And kind of just a caveat on that, to touch on a touchy subject, but to not go into it. Like, think about the process that it takes to become a licensed driver in the United States of America. There's tests, there's classes, there's training. Now think about what you have to do to physically become a parent. Technically, it's infinitely easier. I have had students whose parents were only that in name. Who came to my programs because they felt safe. Who had a very toxic view of masculinity from their fathers. And then when they came to me, see a version of a man that looks vastly different than their dad. That's compassionate and loving, but also strong. And now they're wrestling with this. Someone once said to me that be kind to your parents as an adult, because realize that, well, you were growing up, your parents were also growing up.
Right.
They were just kids who had kids. Mine especially. Like, my parents were very young when they had my oldest sister. And sometimes we look back and I tell my dad some of the things that he did. And he's like, I did what? Wow, sorry. I'm glad that, like, you didn't turn out too messed up. Little bit. But, like, it's good to sometimes have that separation so that kids can learn how to be discerning. And at the school where my wife used to teach at, one of her first schools, you can not have the parents in class. You can kind of have the best of both worlds. They had their youngest kids' classes were in a back room, closed off from everybody, with a giant monitor in the parents' waiting room and a camera in that room. And those same parents had access and could access that camera from the internet. So if they just dropped their kids off, hey, you can go and watch online. We live stream the kids' class only to the parents. Who
so it's like a one-way interaction. They can
so they can still have that one-way interaction.
Input to the class, which probably as a teacher that feels great and easy.
That's one of the goals. Probably not for when we have our at this point, it's the third iteration of our school, because we're still one iteration away from being able to do this. Our final dojo location, we want to have a space that is like that. Not that we're going to separate parents from every class, but there definitely are times in which I think it is beneficial to let kids be kids and not be corrected, because I don't correct kids when they do the same things that their parents will yell at them as. I'm like, they're in here to be destructive.
Right.
And I have destructive times for kids.
Yeah.
Sure. And that makes sense. And I think, that leads very well. That's a great segue into is there a middle ground, right? And before we get there, I'll say, for me, the biggest benefit to not having the parents in the room, because that's where we were, is a focus issue. That kids absolutely act differently when their parents are in the room. Some of the students act out more because they're looking for validation from their parents. They want to see their parents react. Some of them are just more shy when the parents are
Right.
so there's definitely some benefits for sure to not having them in the room. And then Victor, you brought up this great idea, which is kind of what's in the middle. And so let's talk about that. Are there ways to get both things, to get the benefits of both sides? Victor, you already mentioned the basically closed circuit camera that parents can log into. Nick, I see you got your hand up. Anything in the middle?
Yeah, I can really say to this one is just judging from my years of teaching in other schools and when I was a junior teacher, it comes to really the individual student that and up to the teacher to express that and say, look, this might be a better course of action. Why don't we try this? And like a brief story on that is not a parent, but I had students who would bring their significant other. And you noticed an immediate distraction. Like one was doing it, they're doing a kata, and both sides too. Like all of a sudden they're performing really well, they're kicking higher, they're pushing harder. It's like, okay, great. And then they turn, look at the window, like, eh? Like, they do that, they're like, okay, no, like, let's tone this down. Maybe you can wait in the car, maybe you can do that. But the same with parents, though. If that individual parent in that relationship or that child is not doing what's needed, then it's up to the teacher to have that individual conversation and maybe switch things accordingly. Like we had one where it was years ago. This was back when I first started teaching, like as a senpai. As a senior student, and there was one that came in, and a parent came in and had a little bit of a rivalry, bad neighbor, quote unquote, had a bad neighbor relationship with another parent, and it was very clearly that things were escalating real quickly. I turned to Sensei and I say, hey, I think you need to do something right there. Like it's about to cause a problem, and
so it's a case by case basis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then just rip them apart and do that. Say, hey, you guys need to go. Like, let's do something else, and then keep that harmony in the dojo.
Yeah, Stephen, any middle ground that you see, ways that you could be able to get the best of both worlds?
Yeah, the comedic middle ground is to have all the parents drop their kids off at your school and then go and watch another school, and that school drops their kids off and their parents come and watch you. So then you get the parents there, but they're not the parents, they're just parents.
All right. Well, that's an interesting one. If any school out there does that, please let us know, because we definitely want to talk to you.
It's a tough thing. I experimented with, getting the parents up on the floor to teach, getting the parents up on the floor to be taught by the children.
Oh,
right. So switch the roles around, in a little segment of a class, and have the student. This would probably not be like the 6-year-olds, but the maybe 10 or 11-year-olds. But to start to develop confidence around, I'm teaching something I know you don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Even though the usual power dynamic is you're the parent, I'm in charge here. I'm leading you, which means I have to care for you, and I have to listen to what your challenges are, and I have to clearly get the lesson across. And then the parent, of course, has to actually just be doing what they're told, not what they think, and not correct the student. So that was a fun kind of a hybrid way to do it. And that, like Nick was saying, that would be a case by case. When I thought this particular set of parents and kids, they would benefit. Otherwise, I'm just adding chaos to the classroom. So that would be, one element. I certainly had parents, on a few occasions I can recall, I asked them to try and distract the kids.
Interesting.
As sort of a little test, are the kids second guessing when I say something? Do they look at the parent before they say yes? That sort of a thing. Or a little bit more fun with the teens, where I have the parents like throw things in the middle of class to see if the students stayed focused on the drill.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of a fun one.
Interesting.
And I'd also often have, the parents and the kids clean up the school at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So like if the parents hadn't been involved, here's a chance to be involved. Everybody's going to help put the stuff away or wipe the mats down or whatever. And then they're getting a little bit more engagement with the school, but they didn't have to, be fully present mentally for the whole class,
Yeah. So for me, the middle ground that I have seen in schools, both that I've trained at and that I've visited, is you walk into the school, there's a big waiting and entry area, people leave their shoes and whatever, and you pass through a doorway into a separate area, but there is a huge glass window, so all
Right.
the parents are not allowed past this space, but the
Right.
parents can sit and they can still watch. And the class was the one that I'm thinking most prominently is, the students stood with their backs to that window.
Yes.
So they're not looking at the parents, but the parents are there. And it's kind of another kind of in the middle where the parents aren't there being a distraction to the students, but the parents are still there and can be present, and we can use them for all of these things.
That's a very interesting point. In my imagination, or the visualization I have in my mind, is that the parents are always behind the students. The students are always facing the teacher with the parents to their back, which
And that's not
I think
always
is fairly universal.
Yeah.
But I hadn't really considered it until I thought of visualizing it the other way, and I think, boy, that would fall apart quick.
So
Also, with the glass dividing the parents, I think it should be hockey plexiglass, so people can really get slammed up against it. The parents have 3D glasses, and then there's.
So I think
box there too.
Yeah.
Is there stuff that we're missing? I mean, I think we're in a good place to start to wrap down. What are any last minute thoughts or anything that we're missing, Victor?
Yeah, so I mean, just listening into all this, I might. It's interesting. I started right out of college. One of the first jobs that I ever had, and I had it for a very long time, was being a youth pastor or an associate youth pastor. And this was a time in which not only did I not have children, I was also not married. So I suffer, and that did not help at all, with extreme imposter syndrome. Let me tell parents how they can parent better to their children when I don't have any. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard, "You're not a parent, you don't know." Cool. And so sometimes I still suffer with that imposter syndrome with things, and to tell whether you buy into whatever your faith is, looking at an account from the Christian Bible from a literary standpoint, there's stories in one of the books of Jesus healing 3 blind men, and he doesn't heal them the same way. He uses 3 different methods. And I think I love that picture in everything, because no one's a cookie cutter. Not every, like Nick said, you have to do what is necessary. And sometimes in our dojos, what has helped me is I walk into the dojo and I put on a different mantle. I put on a different persona. This is my house.
Yeah.
You don't act out even as a parent. It's there's this embarrassment. I don't act out when I'm in someone else's home. So I walk around like it is my home. I even sometimes, when I'm away doing different seminars that aren't physically in my dojo, I wear a more formal uniform to help me put on that mantle. I had one of the parents ask me the other day, because I am a 5th degree in karate, and he asked me, "How long did it take you to become a master?" And I'm like, "Who's a master? What are you talking about?" "Oh, that's right. You know nothing." And I guess I technically am one. But like, I suffer from that. But I sometimes, when I'm out, I have my instructor's black belt. I'll wear that when I teach to kind of put on this persona, like, this is my house. I am the final authority in this place, to kind of help me not to help me be the authoritative person, but to be the mediator of what needs to happen. Say, if you have 2 parents who have issue with each other, but their kids are both in class, walking up to them and saying, "Hey, listen, I don't know what's going on here. Not here. Take it outside."
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes it's important for us as instructors or people who run programs to remember that you're the guy. You're the guy on the wall for the kids. You're the guy on the wall for the other parents watching. And if you don't do anything, and if you don't take up that authority, someone else is going to, and it may not be a good person.
Right.
Yeah. Stephen, we're wrapping up here. Just any quick last minute thoughts here before
I was just following on Victor's really helpful thoughts about the imposter syndrome thing. My response to parents who, I had heard the same thing. Well, you don't know, you're not a parent. And I said, well, that's fair, but I have a different view than you do, and that can be helpful. It's not more right than yours, but together we may approach more appropriate than either of us alone. I have perhaps more experience with more types of kids in more situations and circumstances than you, who have 2 kids, but you have more experience with them, 24 hours a day than I do. And I'm just offering another point of view that I'd like you to consider. But also, I want to try and consider yours when it's appropriate, that I can actually take on your full point of view, not just a comment in class. Because it's not that you're bringing them into my class so I can be their parent or correct all your parenting. It's just to give them another point of view, to shape them with another tool in another place in another manner. So, that imposter syndrome is a really tough thing, I think, across humanity, and certainly we see it in this field.
Awesome. Nick, last minute thoughts?
I totally agree with what both these gentlemen are saying. I have the imposter syndrome myself. I don't have biological children. People say I'm the funkel. I'm the fun uncle type person, but it's just, echoing on what Steven's saying, I said, let's give you another opportunity because we're both here to shape the individual. I would tell a parent, like, I'm here to be able to help your kid to be a better student, to be a better person overall. So let's work together.
Right. I'm often doing that with teaching kids like I'm trying to figure out how can I teach the adults without them knowing it. Like,
well, yeah, and that's, like that I do really well too. Like, okay, let's go together on this. Like, okay, cool. Like, where it's like, if I used to be the one that said, look, I'm the authority. I got the black belt. What are you doing? And then say, hey, you know what? Here's a way we can do that. Do you have an idea how we can do this? And do like a David Blaine thing. Oh, we could do one way. Well, why don't you try another way? Are you sure you want to do that? And then they go my way too. So,
nice.
So it is the same way to do that, but it's a community involvement to be able to help the kid out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all for being here and chatting about this. People listening or watching, what did we miss? Are there things that we missed? Let us know. We can't think of every scenario and everything that on this topic, so we'd love to hear from you. You can hear more about our guest, Stephen Watson. You were episode 676. Did you know that, your interview episode?
676. Awesome.
Yeah. Nick, do you remember your episode?
807.
Oh, so close. 806.
807 was much better. 807 was great.
Victor, do you remember your interview episode?
Not even close.
772.
Ooh, 772. Okay.
So, if you guys want to hear more about these fine gentlemen that we have on today, check out their interview episodes to hear more about them. If they said anything that you don't like, you can send hate.
I always say things people don't like.
Yeah, and now is a good time to book your flight to Victor's school for free training day.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's true. So, people watching and listening, thank you so much for being a part of this and listening and taking time out of your day to have us in your ears. I think I can speak for all of us when I say I appreciate that. We all appreciate that you've done so. If you want to check out the show notes for this episode, whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. You can find show notes on every episode we've ever released. Whistlekick.com is where you can go to purchase books and sparring gear and training programs and all that jazz.
Cool hoodies.
And what's that?
Cool hoodies.
Yeah.
Cool hoodies. Yeah, like this one. Actually, you can't purchase this one. This is a custom one. But Anyway, we've got 4 of us on here. I wonder if we can all do it together at the same time.
No, we can't.
Probably not. Let's try it, though.
No,
Ready?
we can't.
Until next time, train hard, smile, and have a great day.
Have a good evening.
Have a good day.
So painful. So painful.